Hello, everyone. Welcome to the second episode of the LA Volleyball Podcast. If you're new here, my name is Amri Azarli, head coach of the Van Nuys Wolves. Each week, I'll be going around bringing coaches from the city section on to talk volleyball. Last week, we had Memo Alvarado from University High School. We had some pretty good things to say. If you haven't checked that one out, go ahead and check it on my channel. This week, we have a 5-time LA City Section champion, as well as a 3-time City Section Coach of the Year. Please welcome Will Reinhart. Coach, thanks for coming on.
Hey, Omri, thanks a lot. If I had known you were going to put me on blast for being a champion like that, I would have gone back to school and grabbed my rings or something, but whatever.
I'm surprised you don't have those things at home, to be honest with you.
Yeah, I know. We left in such a big hurry that there's probably a bunch of things I left at school that I should have had with me, but hopefully they'll still be there when I get back.
So how have you been, and what have you been doing to pass the time?
Well, I'm not only a coach for LA Unified and for Verdugo Hills High School, but I'm also a teacher. So I've been really busy learning how to become more like you, as in like more technologically literate and doing virtual classes and distance learning, all that. So that's been pretty busy in terms of the academic side of things. And of course, in addition to teaching my social studies classes, I've been very active and busy with my kids via Zoom. No in-person stuff, so we've just been virtual right now.
Mm-hmm. For sure. I can see you growing that beard out too. I'm trying to grow it like you, man, but I don't think it's working that well. I gotta try a little harder. Wait a couple more months.
Yeah, I don't know. I think I've been good at doing two things during the break, and that's been growing facial hair and eating too much food. So I definitely have put on the COVID-19, that's for sure.
So our season came to a sudden and shocking end. Well, actually, I don't know if it's shocking, but it came to an end. And you guys, as I'm looking at your schedule right here, you had 5 wins, 0 losses. The competition wasn't completely the best that you guys have played before, but what were your expectations after those 5 games?
Omri, it's a great question. For our school personally, I mean, if I'm being honest, I had really low expectations. We had exactly 2 returning players from the previous year. And of those, only one of them was a featured player that we had used in our previous success. We had going into the season 4 consecutive East Valley League titles going. We had, gone very deep into the playoffs last season in the Division II final. And the previous 2 seasons we were in semifinals. So having lost so much talent, I didn't expect much. And then bizarrely, for I think a confluence of factors, I really underestimated my team. I think that they knew, because I don't really hide a lot from them. They knew that we were going to be shorthanded, and I think they took it on as a challenge. And despite having the softer schedule, which for me was very intentional, because I didn't want these guys to be crushed, just ego-wise, knowing that they were so inexperienced. They responded quite well, and I know we had a very tough opponent in Pauley in our league, so I'm not going to pretend that wasn't going to be a very tough hurdle to overcome. But I was amazed that we did as well as we did, and look, we made it all the way to the virtual finals on Renee Lopez's virtual final. So if we were just a little bit better, if I spent more time instead of on peppering and hitting and setting, and we'd focus a little more on Instagram, I think we would have really pulled it off this year.
I agree with you. Made it to the semis of the Open Division. That means something to us,
Right?
Shout out to Renee Lopez for doing that.
Yeah, he's awesome. That was fun. It was a good distraction, I think, for everybody.
Yeah, for sure. So you talk about this team was kind of inexperienced. Could you let us know what are some strengths of this team? Maybe toss out some names here and there.
So yeah, I mean, look, the main guy we had coming back that was, who we were going to be building around, Alex Hernandez, was, a very good to, I would say very good is a good description of him as a volleyball player. Where I thought he, for us, became exceptional was through his leadership and the way he really, I think, galvanized the team. So if we were looking at skills versus, let's say, intangibles, I think his intangibles really pulled up his overall game. And so then everyone else kind of built around that, you know. We did have, quite honestly, probably more talented, certainly potentially more talented players than him on the roster. But his experience, his leadership was probably the thing that turned around what could have been ugly for us this year. That plus obviously COVID and not having to play, you know, Daniel Ramirez and Paulie twice. And honestly, you know, Art Yang over at Grant has been just on the move, coming strong. You know, I know you know Art, and so it wasn't like it was all going to be easy and stuff. But the young guys we have, for instance, Andrew Porch, the guys I'm talking about with eligibility remaining, Andrew Porch, Alan Espinoza, Isaiah Cancino. Those are guys that I think still have a pretty decent ceiling. And so while it hurts for us to not be on the court right now, their bodies will be a year older next year. I think they've all expressed in our time together on Zoom and so on, a real passion for wanting to dedicate next season not only to their own journey, but to their teammates who couldn't finish theirs the way they wanted to. I'm sure a lot of teams have felt that. And so, I mean, and then of course, a big X factor, and I don't know if you were going to address it or not, but is our new head coach, right? Our new head coach is Ross McFarland, who is a player of mine from '08. And Ross worked with us in the girls season with the Frost-Off girls. And then this year, as I'm getting to a stage in my career where I kind of want to transition some of the reins of responsibility, Ross was taking over day to day in terms of practice, in terms of decision making on in matches and so on. And I think, much as I am a 5-time champion and coach of the year, blah blah blah, you know, like at a certain point, it's you young studs, it's the Omris, it's the Cenas, it's the Rosses, honestly, that are going to lead us to the next level. So, you know, I think Ross's enthusiasm, passion, knowledge, talent, skill, all that, I didn't appreciate what a big impact that was going to have on the team, and I think it really did.
For sure, for sure. Your teams have always been competitive, whether you've been in Division 1 or Division 2. So, who are some other teams in the city that you admire?
Well, I mean, I don't know exactly what Memo said, but it's not a it's not a very closely kept secret that there's a good, maybe I would say, dirty dozen or so that are in the conversation every year. You know, Mercado at Taft, you know, Bergeron at Eagle Rock, Hunt, and you know, and Gray over in the Western League. So, you know, I think we've fed off each other for a lot of years. Going back to, you know, Van Nuys, Dave Che, he doesn't coach anymore, but Dave Che is my boy. And even though he's not coaching at Van Nuys, he's over at ECR now just teaching, you know, he left I guess a legacy over there at Van Nuys too. So young guys like you can come up and pick up the reins and take it to the next level. But there are, I mean, look, Sophia Humada, I mean, there are so many coaches that I respect and I try to steal from them all the time, rip off what they're doing, watch in amazement. Memo's a good example. Memo's got so much passion at uni. He doesn't always have the same horses that Pally has, you know what I mean? But when he's had talent, he's really shown everybody that he's a force to be reckoned with. I love, you know, one of my dudes that maybe you'll appreciate this because your school has been sort of in that sort of second tier along with mine of good schools, but not necessarily Granada, Taft every year kind of thing, or Pally. And that is a guy like Elias Gomez, you know, who used to be at Elizabeth for so many years and now's at Mesas. He's an old timer like me, so I got respect for the old timers who are still bringing it and showing the passion for their kids. So I always got to give a shout out for Elias. You know, Dave Lertzman's bounced around everywhere. He's been at Birmingham. He's been at Chatsworth and Sylmar, and say what you want to say about Dave's approach to things, because he can be a curmudgeon, right? He's he can be rough around the edges, but Dave has always cared about the kids. He's been successful wherever he's gone. And although I don't think he grew up a volleyball kid like you and I did, he's done so much for the schools he's been at. I mean, I don't know. I know you only have an hour on the podcast, but there's a lot of city section people that are just tremendous.
Mm-hmm. Dave Che, youngsters, if you don't know who Dave Che is, go check out Dave Che. Dave Che is the man. He left when I was a freshman, after I was a freshman in high school. But even to this day, I text him, I call him, we talk. He comes over sometimes to practice. He's just the man. So if you don't know who that is, go figure out who the legendary Dave Che is.
Yeah,
Everybody,
Dave
everybody loves
Che's
him.
he's my brother from another mother. I love Dave. I give everyone a challenge. Find one person who will say a bad thing about Dave Che. You can find someone who will say a bad thing about me. You can find someone who will say a bad thing about Cena or some other person, Dave Lursman. I mean, when you're competitive like most of us are, you're not always on your best behavior, right? And I think for the most part, we're all just, it's between the lines. It's not personal. But even that's one thing I always did admire about guys like Dave Che or Jason Carbonell over at, Canoga. There's a few of us that I'll give them all the credit in the world. They have found a way to be competitive and successful and do it in a way that I admire so much. I wish it came easier to me.
Same here, same here. So we have the best experiences on the court with our kids, and I know I have a bunch of memories that I have with my kids that are not on the court. Maybe it's a lunch here and there. Maybe it's a beach trip, a banquet. Maybe I've seen you had some TikToks of some of your girls volleyball players. So can you just talk about your favorite moments, girls or boys? What are your favorite moments not on the court?
So it's crazy, you know, because I've been at this for a while. I have relationships with players that go back to the 1990s. In fact, the one really kind of fun thing I've done during this whole COVID shutdown is go golfing when they finally opened up golf courses. And two of the guys I golfed with were guys from a team from 1999 and another team from '01. So going that far back, I've maintained a social relationship where appropriate, right? Especially once they're alum. For the kids that are currently on the roster and you have that distance that's appropriate where, you're the adult, they're just children and so on, there's always room to make it personal. There's always room to goof off or have some shared experience that's not on the court. And you mentioned the TikToks. I have no shortage of ways in which both boys and girls teams that we have been able to take it away from just purely X's and O's and find ways to make it sort of, personal and fun. And I hope actually, even though I'm a lot older than you are, Omri, and a lot older than these kids, I really hope to be able to maintain a relationship with those kids as they want in the future. Because for the most part, I mean, it's hard for me to think of too many players that I've had over, maybe 1,000 players over the years that I didn't have fond memories of. And for either sports or the kind of kids that are attracted to volleyball or luck, I don't know. But it's been a super positive experience, which is one of the reasons why I'm still doing it at this point. Not a lot are. I think I'm the third or fourth longest tenured coach in the district. Tom Harp has been doing the boys program longer, and Alan Hunt, who's kind of doing a transitional thing like me, may have a year or two. I mean, there's a couple in that range where strictly volleyball. I know Dave Lertzman's been coaching LAUSD sports since before God, but the reason to do it is not the money. I mean, look, you get paid the same I get paid, right? So you got to have a certain love for it, and the kids are at the center of that. And so yeah, I have tons of those kinds of just wacky experiences. I'll give you one little tiny little thing. This year for my girls' banquet, which we got to do in February, just before everything shut down. So it was kind of cool because we were at Dave and Buster's, and that's not a place you want to be with COVID. But they gave me a bobblehead. Like, I don't know, somehow like it looked pretty much like me. I don't know where you can get these things online or whatever, but they gave me this bobblehead. And then because the bobblehead didn't come in until we were on Zoom, they kind of made like a little, presentation of it on the Zoom where the girls kind of were showing me it and all this kind of stuff and telling stories about me from the season and stuff. So those are just some silly examples of ways in which, yeah, the sport matters, of course, and we wouldn't be together if it weren't for volleyball. But within that, there's a lot more to it, as I know you know.
That's the first time I've ever heard of a bobblehead as a gift.
Is that crazy? Yeah.
That's Van Nuys kids. You hear that? It's a little hint for you guys.
It's pretty cool. Yeah, why not? Right, something different.
For sure. The girls team actually had a pretty good season. I think you guys got knocked in the semis of Division II. Is that correct? So
that's right.
What was that experience like?
Well, so this particular girls group was as special, if not the most special I've had. I mean, it's hard to compare team to team over eras and stuff, but it's hard to find another team that I had as much fun with or had as much success with over the years. We graduated 13 seniors. That's the biggest graduating group I've ever had. I think only one returning player for next year from the current varsity. So again, I'll have my work cut out for me as far as like regrouping. But because I had 3 or 4 years with basically all those girls, we got pretty close, and there were plenty of off the court types of experiences that occurred, both positive and negative, that probably brought us even closer than usual. So we had won a championship with this core, the girls that were sophomores back in 2017. We got moved up by 1 point in the divisional things the following year and lost to the eventual champion San Pedro in the quarters last year. So this year we were kind of hoping, because we then dropped back down to D2, where our school seems to be, because we're a very low enrollment school, we're like 1,200 kids. So we end up, because of performance, consistently being at the bottom of the D1, top of the D2 divisional sort of placement. And from year to year, it seems to fluctuate that way. This year we were on D2, and looking at the groupings, it's not nearly as deep as the first division. So we thought we would have a really good chance with all that experience and with less competition than we would see in D1. Unfortunately, we just couldn't figure out university this year. Memo, I think, had a very similar team to mine in a lot of ways, probably more athletic. But his team was pretty inconsistent as well through the season. They had moments where they looked like they could challenge about anybody, and they had moments where they really were trying to find themselves. Each time we ran into that team, we came up on the short end. And it was ironic because in every single set we played, we had leads, and sometimes 24-22 type leads, and never figured out a way to close the door, never figured out a way to solve the problem. And so that resulted us playing in a road match for the semis. We're really good at home, I think, like most schools. And, it's tougher to win on the road when you're in somebody else's house. And they had a good night. I mean, I got to say, like, the best I saw them play during the season, and I saw them play quite a bit, was the night we played them. So, they deservedly advanced over us. It was super disappointing. The little bit bracketology, I think if we'd been on the other side, we might have made the final with Elizabeth over on the other side. But, it is what it is. You got to play the teams you have in front of you. Those are the breaks. It didn't work out for us. So there was pretty significant disappointment, because we worked hard in the off season like everyone does. And knowing we had that level of experience, it wasn't unrealistic to think we could have accomplished it. So I think when you're not expecting much and you come up short, you're not that disappointed. But when your expectations are high, it's tough. It's bitter. That's tough. But that doesn't change the fact that I had an incredible experience with them. That group of 4-year seniors, they put together the most wins my school's ever had in a 4-year stretch, and all the other good things that you'd want. And we got a ring out of it too. So, but you're greedy when you're a competitor. You want more. And so, yeah, it was tough, but it was also tremendously rewarding. And I'm really thankful I had the chance to be a part of those girls and that experience.
So one constant thing I've heard you say is fun, right?
Mm-hmm.
I know you're all about fun. I watched your interview with Connor back in 2018. You love to have fun. Can you describe for us your coaching style so everyone can just listen? Yeah,
I mean, so for me, I've always taken it seriously that we play volleyball. We don't work volleyball. For me, the core of sport is play. Play is meant to be fun, in my opinion, in almost every situation, certainly in youth sports. It's intended to be fun. I understand our culture has gotten ever more competitive and serious. People have specialized. You see more and more players in every sport playing off season in club and travel teams. College is expensive, and if you think you have a chance to get a college scholarship, there's a reason to be more intense about it. But this isn't college volleyball. This isn't professional sports. I encourage my kids to play multiple sports. I think you only get one chance to be in high school. And we all know the percentages of kids that are high school athletes that are going to end up one day making a living at their sport. It's infinitesimal. especially a sport like volleyball. So at the core of what my experience has always been, even though I'm a very competitive person and we do work hard at things, it's been fun. It's got to be fun. It's got to be play. That's where we start from. Higher than, honestly, no BS at all. It's more important than winning for me. The thing about that is that they're symbiotic, right? Winning is more fun. If you're competitive, because it's not PE volleyball, it's not recreational volleyball, it's competitive interscholastic volleyball. So winning's fun. So then those things do go hand in hand, right? But if we're going to say they go hand in hand, for me, the fun part has been more important than the winning part. So for instance, if I look at the fact that we had a team capable of winning city this year, and we didn't, and you know the Wildcats over there at Uni made sure of that. But am I going to look at that as like, oh, got a failure in the sense of like, why did I do this or something? Absolutely not. We still had fun. That night wasn't particularly the most fun night in the world, but we have to look at all of what we did and what we accomplished together so that the next year we'll want to come back and do it again. Because sometimes you put so much pressure on just outcome instead of process that you know, you can walk away from something that was like incredible, and you know what, there's always someone better than you. I'm sorry, I don't care who you are. You could be LeBron James. I mean, there's still someone better than you, and you can't measure yourself that way. But if you have a smile in your heart, if you know there's a song in your head that you're playing and you're just thinking about the good times you're having with your friends, isn't that why any of us do sports? And so for me, that's been the bedrock of where I start. But if you've ever, well, you have coached against me, but you've ever seen me at a game, I mean, I'm an intense person from whistle to whistle. Do you know what I mean? Before and after, I mostly could care less. I just, you know, want to be in the camaraderie of fellow coaches and fellow teams and stuff. But the during part, I expect a hell of a lot out of my players. I've been known to, you know, cast the occasional dirty look to a referee. You know, much as we might be friends for the handshake before the game, I'm not going to usually be, you know, trying to figure out how to help you win my game. You know, like you and I are going at it. That's what I love, that sort of intensity that can come out in a positive way. I think it raises both sides. And but either way, whether I win or lose, like it has to be about fun. So that's what I come back to.
For sure. I totally agree. So you mentioned enrollment at your school is pretty small. So I looked it up, and what I got was 1,250 students, right?
Yeah.
So with other successful sports such as basketball, baseball, soccer, and many others, as well as separate school activities that we always encourage our kids to participate in. How are tryouts for girls and boys volleyball at Verdugo Hills?
So girls volleyball, the tryouts are kind of insane. It's going to be really weird this year because we're not able to do tryouts in the ordinary fashion. But in a typical year, you know, we'll probably end up with 100 to 120 girls try out, even though there aren't that many girl athletes at our school. You know, if you divide the number you just said in half, you're talking about 600 plus girls. And of those, maybe only half of them actually play a sport, right? So of the 300 or so available female athletes, you know, usually more than a third are trying out for just girls volleyball. It's a blessing and a curse. The blessing part is obviously the deeper the pool of kids you have, the more likely you're going to get some kids that are taller, stronger, jump higher, are nicer kids, better leaders, etc. So at Granada Hills High School, if you have 4,800 kids and 2,400 of them are female, and of the 2,400, more than 1,000 play sports, you have an advantage over a school like mine, or a smaller school even, that has a much smaller pool. Of course, the curse of it is that, you know, there's a lot of kids, especially at programs where they're really pretty solid programs. I'm sure Van Nuys is this way. It's the dozen or so programs I was thinking of earlier all have this problem, which is you can't keep them all. 6 girls on a court at once. And even if you have 3 teams in the program, I mean, what's a reasonable number? So I tend to probably overdo it. And I'll usually end up with somewhere between 40 and 50 players, even though realistically only 18 are actually on the court at any given time, right? So, you know, 15 or so varsity girls, 15 or so JV girls, and then maybe as many as 20 girls on the frost off. It's a management issue, and there are going to be certain kids at the end of the bench that sometimes aren't pleased about being so far down the bench. Because I have the fun approach, and because I was a player, you were a player, I have a player's mentality as well. And I think that if a kid shows me that they're working their tail off, they're just not as good as somebody else. I still want to find an opportunity for that kid. It's not necessarily their fault that they're not as tall, strong, or skilled, but if they're still showing me the effort, I'll look for ways to find success for them. And so even in playoff matches, even in you know, significant matches, I'll play kids that are at the end of the bench if I feel like it's not going to be a threat to the outcome of the match, as much as I can still, because I have to still put the team ahead of any one player, right? And if playing a single player just because their mom is there or just because they didn't get to play much or whatever, you know, it's not AYSO. And if that could maybe cost our team success, well, we got into this for the team, not for any one person. But within that, I don't really believe in having players on your team that you're never going to give opportunity in a match. They shouldn't just be there to shag balls and fundraise. They've got to be there to play at some point. And for me, it's a bit of a management issue. And when I have to cut kids from the tryouts, you know, I'll cut more than I keep. It sucks. I hate it. And I get the stink eye walking down the hallway at school. Because remember, I'm a teacher. I've been called every name on emails from kids about why I didn't pick them and blah, blah, blah. And, you know, it is what it is. It's a good problem to have. But our tryouts are competitive. And even kids, this is probably the toughest thing, and I'm sure you've had this too, where the kids that I have that are in the program this year fully understand, because I make it clear from day one of their tryouts as freshmen, that just because they're on the team this year does not mean they're on the team next year. And they have to compete for their job. It's not common where a kid is good enough to be on your team and not progress. So a kid who I had on varsity last year is not, it's unlikely that kid's not going to make varsity the next year, but it's not a guarantee. So those are the toughest ones, when you cut someone loose that you already have a couple of years sort of relationship with because they've been in the program, but they just haven't developed. And you're thinking to yourself, you know, I can't see putting you on a higher team when you haven't developed, and I got to make room for the younger ones. So those are tricky things. I think we all deal with that as coaches, but and I don't like it. I think some coaches are able to handle it easier. I don't know if I'm just a wuss, or I have a daughter, you know, so and a son, and so I think of it also as a dad. But I've never liked it. I've never liked cutting kids. It's not exciting. It's not fun. I don't look forward to it, but it's just part of the job.
I can totally agree. You know, it's a blessing and a curse when you have all those kids at tryouts, but it sucks when you just can't take all of them. Even if
Yeah.
they're not the best at volleyball, you just want to take them. It's always good to have more kids.
Hey, and I'll tell you, I've even done things on occasion, not often, but on occasion, where offer a kid like, hey, I can let you be a manager, or find some way in which to, like, because you just know it's going to break that kid's heart. And the one cool thing about coaching, well, not one, but a cool thing about coaching is just that, you know, it's such an amazing intervention experience. And you know as well as I do that not every kid goes to school for their English class or their algebra class. So sometimes having kids be a part of a group where they can, you know, in the case of the girls teams, you know, share, you know, ribbons for their hair and write each other little notes before games and braid their hairs and things like that and share text messages, to just being able to look at their parents and say, yeah, I made a team. You know, sometimes, like, I got to be honest with you, I look at it that way. And I feel like it's an awesome opportunity. I had a kid this year, you know, she looked like a volleyball player. I'm telling you, if you had seen her mother, when this kid came as a ninth grader, her mom was with her. Her mom was jacked. I mean, clearly a fitness person. And like, she looked like she was professional, like one of these women on like the Peloton commercial or something. And her daughter was taller than her. And she was still eighth grade going into ninth grade. I'm like, oh, snap, right? This is going to be awesome. Well, I mean, I'm sorry, but the gene pool somehow got confused somewhere. And this girl was tragic as an athlete, but a wonderful human being. And anyway, she always looked good getting off the bus, which, you know, psychological warfare is part of the game too, right? But anyway, probably one of my favorite players. She played 4 years. She only played varsity this year. She didn't play a hell of a lot, but I will tell you this. The most bizarre thing happened in this particular kid's case, which is that on senior night, when we were playing our arch rival Poly in our gym, which had 200 people in it, in our gym, 200 people feels like 6,000 in your gym. So it felt crowded in there. It was very loud. Both Poly and Verdugo, night game, the whole bit. senior night, but what are you going to do on senior night when you have 13 seniors? It's like, I can't start all seniors because there's 7 that are still not able to play. She got in there. She got to play. We had a decent lead, maybe, I don't know, 20-10 type lead in the third set. We had the match under control by that point. I got her in there, and as it worked out, she ended up getting like this pathetic off-speed paintbrush kill that was so ridiculously bad, it hit the poly player's hands as she's coming down, and it goes down for a kill, right? I mean, like this oops, excuse me kind of kill, but we won the match on senior night, clinched the East Valley League Championship for the 4th straight time, and everyone was like crushing on her at the Central. This is a kid who played, 8% of the matches during the entire season and pretty much always in garbage time. And I could not have been happy. I felt so rewarded by that moment for her, for me, for like, I don't know, karma, because this is one of the nicest kids, best kids, strongest kids I had been around, but not a really good volleyball player. And when it works out like that, dude, I mean, that will put a smile on your face. At least for me, it did.
I have had those experiences where there's that kid on my team who doesn't get a lot of playing time, and I just throw him in there. It's the last couple of games. We're playing a team that's not as skilled as us, and they get that kill or they get that dig or that 3 pass, and it means the world, honestly.
Yeah, and you're totally hoping because, like, if mom or dad or family or friends are in the stands, you're just like, I mean, I don't know. The sentimental person in me is just like crossing my fingers because the ball's going to find him, right? I mean, anytime you put a kid like that in there, the ball's going to find them. And so they're either going to look really bad and be hugely crushed and embarrassed and dispirited, or, as can happen, like you're describing, like with this particular player, they get that moment. And it may not be 4 years of all city, all league, whatever. They're not being recruited, whatever, but they get their moment. And I think, sometimes it's small things that stay with us for a long time. I hope that that's the case. I hope that we all can do that for our players.
For sure. So you mentioned the East Valley League, and I just want you to let everyone know what it's like playing in the East Valley League. What are some of the good teams, or all the teams, and how are the coaches, players? What's your experience has been like?
Yeah, so East Valley League is, it's probably considered to be the 3rd strongest league in the valley of the major leagues. So if you go from west to east, it kind of like both socioeconomically and then athletically and then just historically, seems like the West Valley seems to have the stronger tradition of success on the courts and so on. The Valley Mission down the middle is up and down. They have certain teams, Van Nuys, when we're thinking about volleyball, Sylmar, schools like that, Kennedy maybe in baseball and other sports where they have their success. And then the East Valley, if you start looking for like East Valley city champions in any sport at any level, there just aren't as many. Having said that, there is competitive play in the East Valley, and especially at the top of our league. It's what usually is the problem is we don't usually have 6 or 7 strong teams, which is actually true in the Valley Mission, to be fair. I mean, like Panoramas and Rositas are not really, pushing the Van Nuyses and the Sylmars. Whereas in the West Valley, Birmingham doesn't always have the best program going, but more or less it's 5 or 6 strong teams where you don't get an off day in the West Valley. And I can plan ahead when I'm playing Chavez to make sure certain kids are getting opportunities. Whereas when I'm playing Poly or maybe Grant, I have to be like, okay, think this thing through carefully because you better have your A game on those days. So for our league, especially Poly Grant Verdugo in most years for the past couple decades have been the stronger programs. We're able to compete consistently with everybody in the city. That doesn't mean we're able to defeat the upper echelon on a regular basis. That doesn't really happen. We play Palisades, Venice, Carson, Granada, Chatsworth. It's, we're going to have our hands full, and we don't usually come out ahead in those situations. But we don't get rolled either. It's not like Armin can say, oh, guys, we're playing Poly today. I'm going to put in the B team. Armin wouldn't do that anyway, but I'm just saying, there's enough talent in our league that you better be ready to play because we always have a chip on our shoulder. I think it's probably true in the Valley Mission, whereas like when you're in the West Valley or maybe, Pally or something in the Western League, you kind of walk in expecting to win in those tight matches, the way maybe Van Nuys might walk in playing Panorama expecting to win. There's risks to being overconfident, right? And so if you take that risk with certain teams, our league, certain teams in the Valley Mission, you get stung. I know your boys team was one of those kind of teams that any smart coach that I had mentioned wasn't going to take lightly. They were not going to, even though they were probably going to beat you in a lot of situations. Wasn't going to be easy, wasn't going to be close. But some days you just don't have the horses and so on. And I feel like that's how I am when I'm in the gym with our school. In the league, there's a certain core that we tend to have the effort. We put in the time. We do the tournaments. We schedule the way we need to be, competitive. And then you have, unfortunately, huge amount of turnover at certain schools. And Reseda is probably maybe the worst example of this, but where schools have basically just decommitted to athletics, and they've said, we're just not going to support it at all. And that's something that's done at the administrative level. Not that the kids aren't there. Reseda has the kids just like everyone has the kids. You can win anywhere. You might be able to win like Palisades does or something because of enrollment size or because of socioeconomic issues. But I don't know. I mean, you look at like Race Adolf at Central City. I mean, if you can win at Central City with an enrollment of 500 kids and, no gym, no resources, you can win anywhere. Elias has done, everyone's done it. So we have usually half of our league that's committed that way. I'm the only one who's been there that long. There's been turnover at Grant, turnover at Poly over the years. So I've seen in the last quarter century, I've seen what that looks like. But they seem to land on their feet, and for whatever reason, their admin and their tradition at those schools is we're gonna find it again. I mean, look, even Cena was for a short time was at Poly, and as soon as Cena got there, he took it from a 3 to a 9. You know what I mean? In terms of like where they were at. If he had stayed there, it would have been bad news for me because I would have had to work twice as hard to have any kind of success with him. But unfortunately for my league, he didn't stay. Unfortunately for my league, he got richer. West Valley got another good coach. So whatever. Okay.
For sure. I am lucky to have boys and girls as well, because the girls, we were seated kind of, I don't remember what seed we got, the 9th, but we ended up upsetting someone, banning, I believe. So they're on the rise too. But the boys, I'm lucky that I get athletic kids as much as I did. We were able to beat Palisades, which is something that hasn't been done in I don't know how long, but that definitely put us on the map. And with all my kids coming back, and I had a guy that was injured this past year, but he is an absolute stud. And so all those kids are coming back. After this next year, it's going to be a little bit of a rebuild, but that's something that every coach has to go through. And I honestly can't wait for it. I want to get through that process and stuff. So,
yeah, but you know how that goes, Omri, too. It's just that, like, if you're honest with yourself as a coach, you don't win without players. I don't care how good of a coach you are, okay? It doesn't really matter. Coaches can take you so far. You have to have the players at some point. So to that point, you happen to have some really talented players that you're able to take even further. But when those guys leave, it's not like they just grow on trees. So the next group of guys that you're talking about rebuilding with, you're still going to take them higher. But the fact is, their starting point was a lot lower and their ceiling may be lower. The program at Van Nuys will still be in good shape because you run it a certain way. And I think we've seen that across all those kinds of programs, not just in volleyball, but in other sports where every year it's the same schools. Now, they don't win necessarily every year, but every year it's the same schools that are in the mix. And in the years where the bracket goes your way, where you have the right athletes, where you have a little bit of luck, where it's meant to be, those are years you win. And in the off years, you still have a good finish, but you don't ever suddenly become like a wasteland because you have the coaching foundation there. It's just that to get to that next level where you can be, exceptional, I'm sorry, you have to have good players, good athletes, kids who are coachable, kids who listen, kids who have chemistry and bond. And for you, you're lucky to have that this year. But even when you don't have it, it's not like Van Nuys is going to be like, oh, snap, I hope we can beat Reseda today. We're screwed, man. I mean, you guys are still going to be in good shape.
for sure. So Let's get a little bit into you and your history. So, what was the biggest win of your career versus the city school? It's a two-part question. What was your biggest win versus the city school? And what was your most disappointing losses versus the city school?
Oof, biggest win. There have been a lot of big wins, and I suppose there's a bunch of different ways to look at it. Um, I would say, just off the top of my head, a particular big win that that I had in 2015, so 5 years ago, kind of tangentially involved Van Nuys, and I'll explain that in a second. But it was actually against Arleta. Arleta, with Steve Martinez as the program, had a very good team in 2015. They had never beaten us in the 10 years that the school had existed. So they had that massive chip on their shoulder, plus they had talent, plus Steve is a good coach. And we had a good team too, but it was going to be, pick 'em as far as our matches were concerned. And the reason why I say it was a big win, it was in the city finals. We had not won the East Valley League. In fact, I think the girls program that I have right now has won, I want to say 6 out of the last 7, if I'm correct, maybe 7 out of the last 8, but it's one or the other, right? We've won a ton in this decade in the teams. But one of the ones we didn't win was in 2015 when Arleta beat us. The reason why it was satisfying is because the one time we beat them, we lost both the round robin and league, but we beat them in the city finals 3-0. And the reason why for me that was particularly satisfying was that early in the season, we had a match over at Van Nuys, preseason match. And I had a disagreement with the referee that resulted in being ejected.
I was there. I was actually taking stats
okay,
on the table. I remember this moment. Yeah.
So I clearly felt that the referee was wrong in his decision. That regardless of, his anger towards me, I hadn't used any foul language with the guy. I hadn't, I never touched the guy, although he later accused me of physical assault. And I said, there's 50, 100 people in the gym, try and sell that one. And of course it was investigated and, it was a false report that the guy ultimately withdrew. And, but in the process, I was put on a 4-game suspension. It got reported in the LA Times. It got reported in the Daily News. All my colleagues were aware of it. And I had never been ejected from a match before. So that match at that point in time, in LAUSD rules at that time, resulted in a forfeit. So we forfeited to Van Nuys, which, whatever, it was a preseason game. We were trailing at the time anyway. We might have won, but most likely wouldn't have. But that wasn't the issue. The issue was that now that I was suspended while pending the investigation, not only did we lose the match to Van Nuys, but I couldn't be in the gymnasium in the next 4 matches. And so one of those happened to be against Arleta, and Arleta ended up beating us in our house 3-0. Obviously, it was pretty emotional for a lot of reasons for me, for my team and stuff. And then when we went back to go see Arleta the second time when I was finally back on the bench, they ended up beating us 15-13 in the 5th set at their place. So they got the seat ahead of us. They felt like they had finally gotten over the Verdugo hump, and I was certain that they had not. And I was looking forward to the opportunity to be on a neutral court. May the best man win. Let's see what happens. And third time was the charm. And we beat them in the city finals at Volleyball in 2015, 3-0. Didn't get the league coach of the year, but I got the city coach of the year. So that felt a little better. It reminded me a little of the year the Giants, couldn't beat the Dodgers for the division title, but still won the World Series in 2014. And you have to ask yourself, would you rather put up a division title banner or would you rather have World Series rings? And so that was pretty satisfying. On the reverse side of it, I think about probably, there's 2 matches that come to mind that are pretty bittersweet. One was a match against Poly in before we had Division 1, 2, 3, not Poly, I'm sorry, Palisades, where we were seeded 3rd. This is back in 2005. I had a really good team that year too, a lot like the one I had this year. And we ended up losing a match in 4 sets at our house, where every score was a 2-point score. Several of them were 26-24, 27-25 kind of thing. I felt like we got incredibly hosed by the referee. And it was really, really bitter in terms of just the whole sentiment of that match. Palisades, as I'm sure you know from having beaten them this year, is not an easy out ever, whether they're having an up year, down year, I don't care what. And they clearly walk in with a certain swagger, whether they're walking into the gym at Van Nuys or the barn at Verdugo. You know, they don't have quite the same ocean view, and they clearly have a certain sort of, I don't know, characteristic or personality that goes with them. Carlos knows it. Carlos wasn't the coach at the time, but you know, all those things combined, it really stung. We had, for us, one of our legendary teams, and I felt like we really got hosed, and we really deserved to play Taft in that semifinal. I don't think we would have won the city title that year, and then of course Taft like just disposed of Palisades pretty easily in the next round. So it was really bitter. The other one was probably a 2014, yeah, 2014 against Eagle Rock. You know, Tim's always coached good teams. They once upon a time used to be a league rival because we used to be in the Northern League. That's when Tim was a player. Remember, I'm so old, I coached against Tim as a player, okay? And in 2013, they had defeated us in 3. We had beaten them 2 weeks earlier in 3, but we were clearly pretty evenly matched. In 2014, it went to a 5th set. We ended up losing like 15-11 or 15-12 in the 5th set. We had a 2-1 lead in set play. I had a huge group of seniors that year as well. I think that also stings a lot, like the loss to Mem this year or the loss back in 2005. When you have a group of people you've been with for so many years, 3 years, 4 years maybe, and you come up short, oh, it's tough. It's tough because you know you're not going to get a chance to correct it with those particular individuals. I go on, right? But those kids, they're done. And those sting, man. You know, so those are 2 that come to mind in terms of the losses. But you know, I've coached over, I don't know, 1,000 matches at this point, boys and girls combined, and there are some that stick out more than others. I'll say that's for sure. I'm sure you've already experienced that in your short career already, and there's some that you may have already had happen that maybe like this Palisades one that you might remember in 20 years. You might, you know. I sure remember some of them like that.
So you are a city veteran. I would consider you a veteran. Pretty sure
For
everyone
sure.
else would. What, you know, some of the best boys and girls teams from the city that you've witnessed during your tenure that weren't your team?
Well, I mean, the boys one it's kind of low hanging fruit. There have been some really good ones. I remember. I don't know. Gosh, I'm trying to think if you would remember this team, but when Jonathan Sheriff was over at Chatsworth, he had a phenomenal team, a freakish team of athletes that was the number 1 seed in the city playoffs one year and lost to number 16 Birmingham. It was such a freaking shock to the system. Not because everyone thought they were guaranteed going to win city, but they had whipped Birmingham twice in league, and they had guys that could jump to the top of the antenna, touch the top of the antenna kind of guys. And they lost, and I remember that being a really good team. I remember some of the Granada teams in the mid-2000s, like 2007, 2008, around there. You know, Pitters and guys like that who played for those teams. Just, God, they were so fun to watch. Some teams Armin's had over the years over at Taft, with big dudes that were going to go on to play basketball, and with like smaller dudes who just had freakish attitudes. He always had a Nurze that was just going to like rip your heart out, you know, Elmo Nurze or Tanzig Nurze or some freaking Nurze was just going to like rip down into your chest and rip your heart out because those dudes were just freaking on fire. But I would say it's an easy one for me. The most talented, best team I've seen was the Palisades team from last year, but last couple of years, you know, I mean, that group with Akatil and, you know, Justin and those dudes, I mean, freaking Setter. I mean, just that team was just insane in terms of quality. That's the kind of team you expect to see at Loyola. You expect to see them at Corona del Mar or you know, maybe Costa or something like that. But for sure that team, even though I know they didn't end up winning the state, and a lot of us thought that they would have won their regional, they were so damn good. That's got to be a hard team to coach if you're Carlos. I've never had that problem, so I wouldn't know. but just to have that much talent presents its own troubles and its own problems, right? For girls, man, there's been a lot of great teams. I remember some of the San Pedro teams of the early 2000s, with Samantha Taylor, people like that. I remember some Van Nuys teams, both with Dave, but even before Dave, when it was Bessler. In 2001, 2002, the Hottawar sisters, they were freaking so, Van Nuys beating Palisades in the finals. That's like, that doesn't happen, but it did. I saw it happen. The Hannah Lebanon and Amber over at Granada, like around, I don't know what it was, 2011, maybe 2010, somewhere in that range. Those girls were amazing. Recent years, I don't know. I mean, there's been individual players recently, but I can't think of any particular teams right now in the last 10 years that really wowed me completely the way some teams from the previous decade did. But we've had some good teams. And the one thing I will say about more recent teams is that since they expanded, the playoff brackets for CIF state playoffs, we're getting victories. There had been a point where from 1979, when Palisades won the CIF state championship, which the format was entirely different, not nearly as competitive as it is now, but they won the state championship, to, let's say, 2010, 2012, 2000, somewhere in that range, I have to look it up, where we started expanding the brackets. No city team won a match in state playoffs. None. Zero. And then they started opening up the divisions. So now it wasn't just the 8 best teams in the state or the region, but now it was like you were in a division and people had opportunities. And now you're seeing on a regular basis 2 or 3 city section teams not only winning in the first round, but I mean, Elko in whatever division they were in made it to a state final. Jordan has done that to a regional final. Pally did it to a regional final. So I think city volleyball definitely has a lot to say. We're not quite at the same level as the creme de la creme of the southern section, of course, but we work at it pretty hard with a hell of a lot more in terms of obstacles and challenges. I mean, I'm pretty sure, Omri, that you don't have 80% of your kids playing on your club team off season. To think about it, they can, if they want to do it, it's going to happen. For most of our kids, that's not the case. Some kids make the effort and the sacrifice, but it's not like universal, and that matters a lot too. Excuse me.
For sure. I definitely, you can see on YouTube those old city section title games. Horace Malal over at Taft playing against Andrew Pitters, Benjamin Kim. There's a bunch of players you could just look up. There's just a bunch of history in the city section that's just so fun to watch if you're into that kind of stuff. So could you name some other coaches in the city that inspire you or that you admire, or coaches that you've learned many things from over the years?
For sure. I mean, that definitely falls into a couple of categories, right? One is guys that maybe you don't know or they're not still active. But I think about old timers like Bud Dow at Chatsworth, Bob Thompson at Silmar, Jimmy Ikeda at Poly. Those are guys that when I was coming up, even over at Eagle Rock before Tim, there was Thomas Puzio. There were these different guys who had already started working on their formula, their secret sauce, and you were seeing it was getting results, and they were getting the blue ribbons, and it was like, people were going kind of crazy, and a lot of them were willing to share, even though they're your competitor. They would, take you under their wing and talk to you a little bit about, this or that in ways that made you feel like you could ask them questions. So I always respect those guys who came before us because that's why we are where we're at. In terms of contemporaries, there's a lot that have a lot of skin in the game. Alan Hunt, for sure. Guy's always prepared. Armin, like the Zen master, he's always got like such a positive attitude and also produces on a regular basis. I don't know Tom as well, but Tom Harp has gotten results. You can't argue with that. Carlos Gray has had a handful of years now over at Palisades to really, he's been able to replicate his success. Down south, I mentioned some people that maybe they don't always lift the trophy, but they've done such an amazing job, which, I think Narbonne, Sophia Humada in particular, she's somebody who just always impresses me. And then there are some random people that I'm more familiar with out here that don't necessarily get the same love because they haven't either had quite the success or they're trapped. It's like being, I don't know, it's like being, try to think of a comparison, but like, it's like being like Allen Iverson when Michael Jordan's playing, you know? Like Allen Iverson was amazing, but he wasn't Michael Jordan, right? And I think about guys like in my own experience, guys like I mentioned to you earlier, Jason Jason Carbajal, who Carbonell, who not have a lot to work with. They're a low enrollment school. The better athletes who live in that part of the valley tend to transfer to Chatsworth and Taft and El Camino and wherever they can because they know that those are the more competitive programs. So it's tough. And another guy that kind of comes to mind too, besides Jason, is Laidlaw, Jeff Laidlaw, who I mean, he's another son of a bitch. I got to be honest with you. I mean, he reminds me a lot of myself. I know he loves the sport. I know he loves the kids, but he is so rough around the edges and he can piss you off so fast. And certainly between myself and Laidlaw, we have a special place in hell when it comes to the officials. They really don't, they don't love us that much. But putting that competitive fire aside and maybe the expression of it, not always the best it could be. I've just, Laidlaw has always put so much into his craft. He's done so. I mean, I love Armin, of course, but I got to tell you, I was so thrilled for Jeff beating them this year because I know how much it meant to him. He's always on the short end of that stick. And for him to take out, I want to say it was a 1-8 or a 2-7 matchup. I know it was disproportionate. I know a lot of people were surprised about that. I was surprised about it only from the standpoint of seeding and knowing what a good program, that Armin puts out there. And he had a lot of talent too. But Jeff winning that this year, to me, it was a lot of validation for the hard work he's put in. And so we may not always come out ahead. You're not always going to beat the big dogs of Taft and Palisades and Granada and so on. But when you do, it's fun. And even when you don't, as long as you made him take a timeout or made him sweat a little or made him I had a fun moment. I don't know if it has anything to do with me or the match, but we played Taft girls earlier this year and they were loaded. I mean, that was on my preseason schedule. They were loaded. We saw them towards the end of the year, which no excuses. They should have been ready to go. And apparently they weren't because of the way their playoffs turned out. But we ended up pushing them. I'm trying to think. I mean, we pushed them 4. And then we actually had a legit chance to push them to 5. But while it was happening, they were the better team. No two ways about it. They were clearly the better team. But my girls kind of had that, I don't give us, tank kind of attitude, which freed them up to not worry about the fact that these chicks were towering over our girls. And we weren't even that short of a team. It's not like we were some little tiny team or something. But just, I remember watching their JV team and our varsity girls going, damn, if that's their JV, we're screwed, So, but we ended up going pretty hard with them. And during the match, this is something I don't see very often. And I've coached against Armin a lot over the years. Armin lost his shit with those kids during a timeout. I don't know if he's just getting older or these particular kids struck a nerve or what the deal was, but he's kind of got that Gandhi ethos where you just feel like he's going to do some sort of he'll say some words of wisdom and, light a gong and maybe some incense will fly up and it's they respond. That's how I picture Armin. And I know that in the practices, maybe it's different and stuff, but during a match, I'm the one that's constantly losing my shit, not Armin. It's me. I'm more of the, Laidlaw, that's just the way I express myself. And Armin is more calm. So when I saw him light up his girls, I just had to say that was a fun feeling. I'm like, damn, I know we're not going to win, but that feels good, man. At least we got him to a point where he felt, I don't know, agitated enough to have to say something and not just leave it to practice the next day. He jumped in and put a stop to whatever they were doing. And then, yeah, they won because they were supposed to. But that was kind of crazy. I love those little moments, the game within the game, Sometimes you come out ahead, sometimes you don't. But I see that in other coaches too, even when they're not necessarily picking up a trophy,
In 2011 and 12, you happen to mention championships. 2011 and 2012, Verdugo had made the finals and was up against Jordan High School, Jordan Bulldogs. Uh, had Jordan been in any other division, they would have, been an extremely big threat. Cesar Medina was amazing.
Yeah, Jordan, for the guys side of things, um, I mean, in the regular season, Taft has been my nemesis over the years. I think for guys season, I think I've played him 8 or 10 times, never beaten them in a match. And no, we've gone 4, we've gone 5, we've had competitive matches, but never have the answer, never figure out how to solve them, even when I have good teams and so on. In the postseason for my guys team, it's been Jordan. Jordan has knocked us out of the playoffs 4 times, right? And 3 of the 4 times was in the title game, right? So, and all of them involved Medina, right? Cesar was a player for 2 of them, and he was a coach for 2 of them. I don't know. I think sometimes you just run into your kryptonite. It sucks. Not appropriate for this podcast, but I have some feelings about how all that played out in terms of like, whether it was a raw deal or whether it was like just the way it goes. But, dude, you got to take it like a man, move on. What was it? I don't know. Do you follow baseball at all, Omri? Well, there's a pitcher he's a Hall of Fame pitcher for the Red Sox. Actually used to play for the Dodgers, named Pedro Martinez. Super stud, Pedro Martinez. And Martinez, when he pitched for the Red Sox, for a few years there, they couldn't get past the Yankees. This is like in the late 90s, early 2000s, and so on. And, that kind of rivalry stirs up a lot of emotions. I remember watching like an ESPN sort of like after interview, and Pedro Martinez says, he goes, what do you want me to say? The Yankees, they're my daddy, okay? They're my daddy. And so I kind of feel like throwing my hands up and saying the same thing when it comes to Jordan, like, they're my daddy. What can I do? Like, it's not that I don't deserve it. It's not that I didn't work hard enough. It's not that my players didn't deserve it. Like, we didn't have the skill, but dude, life is funny that way. And sometimes, you end up with the short end of the stick, and when it happens to the same team and when it happens in big moments, dude, it sucks. But the longer you stay in something, the more chances you're going to have experiences on both sides of that. And I think when you check the ledger, you can feel good about what you've done, even if not every last thing was the way you wanted it. Those 2011, 2012 losses were tough. They were tough. And especially 2012, we were the number 1 seed, 34 wins during the season. We had learned a lot of lessons from the previous year, and we absolutely could not handle it. I believe psychologically more than technically and physically, although technically and physically it was a challenge because Medina's really was a great player. I mean, and honestly, he was a one-man wrecking crew. You could have taken their best player out and our best player out, which was CJ Suarez, who ended up playing over at CSUN, and we for sure would have won. But he was such a massive part of what they did between the ears, and then of course, with his arm and his legs, that it just wasn't meant to be. And I think, I don't know if you remember watching Cesar play, but he was definitely one of those guys that a lot of people remember watching him play, because he's not, when you look at him, he's not impressive. I don't know, maybe 6 feet tall or 5'10" or something. Yeah. He's not like, he doesn't ripple with muscles and you're like, well, I get it. He looks like a normal dude. Like, he could just be Joe off the street, random guy. But the combination of really impressive athleticism and just superior volleyball IQ, every shot you could think of, he was playing at another level. And it was something we couldn't deal with. And we tried. Every piece of tape I could watch, every match I could check out, but there's just certain times where it's like, you're the Utah Jazz and they're the Chicago Bulls, baby. What can you do?
If you haven't checked out Cesar Medina, kids, go check out Cesar Medina. He's one of the greatest players to come through the city section ever.
Yeah, and in particular, Omri, that's a great point you just said, which is that he's one of ours. You know what I mean? He's a city section kid. This isn't some prep that came out of, Redondo Union High School or whatever with all, his dad was a former AVP player and blah, blah, blah. no, this is just a dude that's like, could be like any of us. And so, yeah, it's incredible.
What makes Verdugo Hills such a good place to play volleyball?
Well, I think it brings us kind of back full circle. I mean, we're a neighborhood school. I like that. It's, if you're not sure what I mean by that, and Omri has given you suggestions for the kids to look up things, look up Westchester basketball. And then you'll have an idea of what I mean when I say that Verdugo is a neighborhood school. Anyway, I guess that's a cheap shot. But anyway, the kids who come to Verdugo are, for the most part, Verdugo kids. They're area kids. They went to the elementary schools, they went to the middle schools, and now they're with us. So it's got a family kind of experience sort of thing. We're not built on transfers. We're not built on recruiting. We're not built on any other kind of stuff like that. We're from a relatively modest community. I mean, our school is like 75% Title I eligible. It's not like we're an affluent community. But yet, unlike a lot of other schools in the district, we do have quite a bit of diversity. We got white kids, Latino kids, Armenian kids, Black kids, Filipino kids, kids you can't tell what they are. And that's always been kind of a fun mix where it's kind of like we're not a one-size-fits-all kind of group. There's just like everyone kind of has to find some acceptance that way. I really always like that. In terms of what's made us successful for guys like Greg and CJ to be able to go next level and stuff. I mean, I think, success begets success, right? When you've spent some time, and I spent some time losing when I started. It wasn't like I walked into a team that was, 0-13 when I took them over. We were not ranked in the top of the playoffs the next year. We didn't make the playoffs the next year. So, but if you stick with it, for coaches that are able to get 5 years under their belt or longer and start really seeing a full class full of kids come through your system, you can develop some success if you're lucky. And so CJ makes Greg possible, right? And Greg makes the next guy possible, and so on, because there's more to the banners on the wall make everyone want to be like, I want to be the next guy on that wall. I want to have my name up there too. And so, that's the gauntlet's thrown down, and the younger kids take it with a greater degree of seriousness, and they want to outdo it from what the previous groups had done. I think the best schools, that's the way it works. We have tremendous support for athletics in our administration. Our principal, Mr. Barsonis, was a coach. He was a college athlete. He was a coach. He was an athletic director. He was the assistant principal in charge of athletics, and now he's the principal. So not being, snuffed at every opportunity about this out-of-state tournament or this new piece of equipment or whatever, he tries to accommodate whatever we can, because he knows that about 60% of Verdugo, for example, participates in a sport. It's a big reason why kids come to our school, along with our magnets and other things that could attract you. And as I mentioned earlier with you, it's an intervention program. So kids are more likely to stay off drugs. Kids are more likely to stay in shape. Kids are more likely to not get, pregnant, not find, poor academic results. I mean, when you're involved in athletics, it tends to lift you up in so many ways that are positive. And for the smart administrators who get that, they're able to find that nice way to balance academics and extracurriculars, especially athletics. I feel like we have that at our school. Our athletic director is great. Our coaches are really highly motivated. We have a really high percentage of teachers who coach, which not every school has because they don't feel supported in that way. And then our walk-on coaches are also tremendous. We've had some walk-on coaches for more than a decade. I mean, that's, they pay you $2,000 before taxes. So like, how would you do that for 10 years plus? And our girls soccer coach, Matt Nachita, I think he's won 3 city titles in soccer and been competitive year after year as a league champion and so on. And the dude, he's a walk-on. So like, that's the environment. I think it's a very family-oriented environment. People talk about the Verdugo way or, how we're family up there and stuff. And there's not a ton of turnover. And I think that speaks volumes. People want to be there. Whereas I see some other schools and the administrators change, the teachers change, the coaches change. It's like a revolving door. And that consistency affects the way the kids are and the programs.
I know you have a son who played for Kennedy High. Is he a junior or a senior right now?
So he's a junior right now. And just like everybody else, he's finishing up the year and he's finishing up his last Zooms this coming week. And yeah, so we live in Granada Hills, and he attended Frost Middle School, and so he had a lot of his friends going to Granada, to Kennedy, to Cleveland, and we even considered, him coming to Verdugo too. But for a lot of social reasons, you want to be with your friends that you grew up with. Plus, Kennedy, and you should know this, Dr. Song, who had started the medical magnet over at Van Nuys, had come to Kennedy the year before Julian got there. And so they were starting up this Kennedy medical magnet, and Dr. Song had done such a great job with it at Van Nuys. That was a very big pull, and he was interested in medicine, and in particular, like, kinesiology, sports medicine, et cetera. So yeah, he's found a really good home there. It's close to where we live, which is nice, but it's also really good for him as an academic fit. And then, he's able to participate in athletics there as well.
Right. So he's played volleyball. What's it been like for you watching him play from a coach's standpoint as well as a father's standpoint?
Yeah, it's crazy. I guess different situations come up with dads and their sons. I had coached him in some youth sports, and it was mixed results. Some of the time it was a little bit hard because he felt maybe I was being too hard on him versus the other players, that my expectations were too high. And so there's those challenging dynamics you have between father and son. In some cases, like especially with volleyball, I've coached him club volleyball, but not high school, and it went really well. So, getting to that high school level, I knew that I wouldn't be coaching him on a day-to-day basis, but I did make sure to get Kennedy on our schedule as a preseason game. So at least I'd be able to play against him. If nothing else, I could see him play that day. And then on other occasions, I would get assistant coaches to take over a practice, because fortunately not every game of the Valley Mission and the East Valley League are on the same day. Some are, but some aren't. So I was able to occasionally pull away from a practice to be able to go watch him play. And grandpa and grandma would go watch, and mom and sister would go watch. And so it was pretty fun to be able to see him play, just to be enthusiastic that way. His team's usually won, so that also, it's nicer when a kid wins. They're happier afterwards. They want to take more pictures, not that they ever want to take pictures, but they're more excited when you've won. When we played him, I am proud to say the couple times we played him when he was a JV player, my JV team beat his JV team. So I got bragging rights at home. But in those games, when the grandparents and the family came to watch, everybody was cheering for Julian. No one cheered for me. And I was like, even my own mother, I'm like, Mom, how could you cheer against me? And she's like, but that's my grandbaby, and blah, blah, blah. So it was fun, of course. I really enjoyed it. This year, obviously, the season was taken away from COVID and stuff, but he's at this point, he's taking a break from volleyball altogether. I don't know what next year is going to look like. He and I had a conversation about that recently. And so, I'm sure you've heard a lot of rumors too, but if we do end up playing some kind of, shortened season, everything being in the spring, which has been discussed a lot, there might be a way where he returns to it in the late spring if it's available. Now, COVID has something to say about that too, so I don't know. And so does Austin Butner and other people, but he's also at this point, like, getting to be a full-fledged teenager. So I know he's looking forward to college. I think at a certain point, it's probably a good thing. At a certain point, you're like done with high school kind of thing, and that's probably good. You shouldn't want to stay there forever. So I can feel that. He's done SATs and AP exams, and I can see he's itching. He wants to get his car. He has a license, and he wants to get his car now. And you remember that's not that long ago for you, so you know what that's like.
I would love to see him back on the court. Last question for you, Coach. Our seniors had an unexpected end. Do you have anything else you'd like to say to them, girls and boys teams?
With our girls team, I'm really happy that they got to finish out their season the way they were playing. But I said to you earlier, so many of our girls play multiple sports. In particular, a lot of them play softball, if you do track. So they had those seasons taken away from them. And I know that was difficult. One of my best players this year, Kara Dunnigan, who was our middle, had planned to go to Cal State Northridge and not to play volleyball, but just to be a student. And then the Cal States announced that they were going to do virtual learning for the fall. So she had been getting recruited anyway by Nabil Mardini, and who's now moved on to Mission. And I think Nabil would be great for her in so many ways. So when we talked about it, we kind of came up with the idea that she should start out at Mission, play some volleyball, whatever that's going to look like, even if they're not able to start right away in the fall, get her, her lower division courses out of the way, and then transfer maybe to play volleyball even to CSUN or somewhere else. And I have a lot of stories like that with kids who, boys and girls who had their season interrupted. For my boys team, it's, I only have 2 seniors, so it's hard for the 2 of them. One of them, basketball was his primary sport, so I think he felt like he had gotten most of what he wanted accomplished done. But the other one, Alex, put kind of everything into volleyball, and so I feel bad for him. Tomorrow we're doing our final farewell Zoom for the year, and so there'll be like different things that his teammates and coaches will talk about and show him and so on. But for all of them, it's unusual. This has been a weird situation for everybody. Of course, sports are not as important as life, and I hope everybody kind of recognizes, like, we're not done with this yet. There's no vaccine, there's no cure, there's not even really good treatment for it, and people in our country are still dying like 1,000 a day. And especially with all the stuff that's been going on with protests and stuff, it's like that's been forgotten in a lot of ways. So we still have a long way to go. And if in the fall and winter there is a second wave, that could scramble things even further. So it's a tough time to be a kid right now in some ways with all the turmoil, So again, that's where I feel like they have a safe harbor in sports. I'm the kind of coach, and we have the kind of program where you're not only valuable to us because of your jump serve. You're not only valuable to us because of your ridiculous block or something. Like, you matter to us as people. And I've always tried to maintain that over the long haul. And I hope that when these kids do leave, whatever the craziness behind it, that they'll know that they can come back and play with us on alumni games and stuff. And like, I've had many come back and coach. You're doing that. You know what I'm talking about. So the door's always open. And even if it's not volleyball related, just to, talk, visit, whatever.
For sure. That's Coach Will for everyone. Coach Will, thanks for coming on. I love talking to you. You don't sugarcoat everything. You tell it how it is. If you want to check out the first podcast, we've got Memo Alvarado. Check it out, the channel. Thanks, Will, for coming on. If you like this video, like, subscribe. Tune in next week to see who we bring on next.